Welcome to the Retirement Outsiders Podcast. I'm your host, Steve, and I'm joined by my wife and co-host, Tony. The focus of this podcast is to discuss various retirement topics from an outsider's point of view. In terms of this podcast, an outsider is someone who is not retired, someone who is not a financial advisor, someone who is not a CPA, lawyer, or healthcare advisor. I'm an engineer, and Tony is a teacher. We've been preparing for retirement for several years. We've encountered many different opportunities and obstacles throughout our careers and our paths to retirement. Early on, so much of it was intimidating. Our intent is to make some sense out of all the financial, accounting, estate planning, and healthcare jargon from an outsider's perspective. In addition, we will discuss some of the behavioral aspects that come with not being tied down to a 9-to-5 job. Welcome to the Retirement Outsiders Podcast. All right. Good afternoon, Tony. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon. I'm excited. A little nervous.
Yeah.
This is a first for us.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. 2026. Here we go.
There we go. So today we got a couple different topics, right? We've got I'll be covering all the numbers. Financial stuff,
He's the engineer.
Healthcare stuff that most people just do not like talking about, essentially. So for today, I'm going to be talking about spending and saving, exciting stuff. And Tony?
I'm going to be talking about things you want to consider when you go into retirement behaviorally. I feel like just when people show the picture of retirement, there's a lot of palm trees and wavy fronds, and I don't think that's realistic. That's a path to sunny depression. That's not going to work. We got to have a plan for that as well.
Absolutely. Okay. So shall we get started? Let's dig in. So spending and savings. I'm going to talk about spending first. So this is, for some people, this is very basic stuff. But what I've noticed is that regardless of your age, some people struggle with this. Our spending, if I think back to when we were in college, we started first living together, we had part-time jobs, and we had to literally, like, when you go to the grocery store, it's like, hey, we've got $42 and change to spend. So
there were calculators.
Exactly. And as we, traversed through life, things got a little bit easier as we started our careers and things. But I think it was back in the early 2000s, I shifted from the paper copy of the checkbook to the, of course, as an engineer, the Excel spreadsheet version of balancing the checkbook.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So I think I've got literally data back almost 20 years at this point. But why do I do that? And why do I like it? And why do I recommend people use something like a spreadsheet or I know a lot of people use Quicken. At this point, there's probably 100 different software packages that you can use. But one of the things I like about Excel is you can customize it any way you want. And you can look at different categories of spending, and you can chop it up kind of any way you want. I mean, in today's world, you can download all the data from your credit cards. You can figure out exactly what you're spending your money on. I'll be honest with you. We don't get down into that granularity where we're saying, hey, we spent X amount of dollars at, Walmart this month or whatever.
Mainly because we don't shop there.
Well, mostly because we hardly ever shop there. But what I really look at is sort of in groups and categories, the kind of like, if we spend money on travel, if we spend money going out to eat, things of that nature. Don't really care where we're going out to eat, but just, how much is it that we are spending?
And maybe down the road, if this takes off and this is something we end up doing, maybe you can do like an online tutorial with a sample spreadsheet and show people how you set that up. Because it is the first time Steve and I sat down and he showed me how he breaks everything down. It is impressive and it is educational. When you know where pretty much every dollar's going, it really helps. Like COVID really taught us how much we spend on dining out because we weren't doing that anymore. And so our monthly spending dramatically decreased, and it was almost all restaurant food.
Yep, for sure. Not that that's not fun, but it is something that you can dial back. So when you're talking about budgeting, that's the whole point. You can look at, hey, these are all the things we need to spend our money on. We need to pay rent. We do need to go to the grocery. We need to buy gas, et cetera. But what are the things you can do to pull back? And that's the whole point of creating a budget, in my opinion, is that it gives you insight into the must-haves and the wants, and how would you change things if you needed to, and how quickly can you change things? Typically your budget is sort of the numbers coming in are what you spent last month, right? So if you want to change something for next month, you got to make a change today, essentially, yep. Right? So, and when I think of budgeting, I look at a couple of different categories. There are things that we spend money on every single month. Our utilities, our rent, our mortgage, gas, food, et cetera. Then there are other things that we spend money on a different cadence, maybe every 6 months or once a year. Car and home insurance, for example. I know you can't pay that stuff monthly, and some people do. There's generally a discount to pay it every 6 months or a year, so that's one thing that you may be spending on something other than a monthly cadence. License plates, that's once a year. Your HOA dues, a lot of times that's once a year. Property tax, a couple times a year. So there's these big things that come up, that aren't necessarily every month. And it's relatively easy to get your budget in focus when the bills are coming in every month. You know what your paycheck is. Maybe you get paid once a month or twice a month. So it's fairly easy to do the math, but especially when I was younger, when that, property tax bill came or that license plate bill came, et cetera, that always kind of threw us off. And we were like, oh, geez, we had X amount of money saved and now we got to spend it on taxes, something that's not even fun, right? So one of the things that I did to make that a lot easier on myself is I figured out what are all those costs for a whole year. I looked at the whole year and I said, add all that stuff up. And I simply divided it by 12. And I said, hey, every month we need to pay that bill. So instead of course, paying the bill, what I do is I set that aside, essentially inside my spreadsheet in what I call a vault, which a lot of banks are now using that same terminology, a vault. I move it over to my property tax or my taxes bucket, my taxes vault. And it's no longer in the mathematics of balancing my checkbook. It's over here and it's growing every single month.
Think of it in terms of like when you take your retirement money out of your paycheck, you don't miss that money. So if you can put yourself in that mentality where you are putting money into this bucket, even though you have access to that bucket, that money is untouchable until you pay that bill.
Exactly. It's a way to sort of trick yourself or just keep that money off the tip top of your mind when you're thinking about going out and going on vacation or spending money on something you don't really need. You don't account for that. And then every time one of those bills comes up and I have to pay it though, what I do is I pay the bill. There's a line item in my checkbook, if you will. And then I transfer immediately over penny for penny, dollar for dollar over from that vault back into my checking account. So it's a net neutral charge to our monthly budget. So it becomes something that is no longer something that you have to address in a negative way in that given month. It's a zero sum transaction, if you will.
Yep.
So I encourage you to look into that. Our bank actually has that technology. I don't even bother using it because it's easy for me to do in the spreadsheet. But the way you do it, I suppose, doesn't matter. But that's one of the tricks I use. Okay, so we covered spending. Now let's move on to savings. How do you save money? What are some tips and tricks? There's really one thing I do that it's a total engineer thing to do, I guess. But I was talking about balancing a checkbook at the end of every month. You make sure it's all balanced and yada yada yada. You have some money left over, right? At least you hope you do. Well, every month, what I do on the last day of the month, every single penny, literally down to 11 cents, whatever it is, I transfer that all out into a savings account or brokerage account. So basically our checking account is in my spreadsheet says 0. Again, I've got a vault for money saved that I put that money in over there. But essentially for my day-to-day tracking of spending and things, it looks like we're down to 0. We're done. We're at the end of the month, we're done. So, and what I noticed was early on when I was trying to save money, I'd have $152, $300 left over at the end of the month. And I would say to myself, I could, go buy some CDs and this and that and whatever. Right. And so then I maybe would go do that, and I wouldn't save the money. I wouldn't move it to a brokerage account. I wouldn't do something with it. Well, yeah. Well, back in the day, I used to buy CDs. I haven't bought a CD probably since, oh God.
My piano book came with CDs.
It sure did. And those I don't own a CD player as far as I know.
Mm-mm.
No. But anyway, I started doing that. I think it was during COVID when I was really, really first started thinking like, wow, retirement isn't as far away as it, it's not impossible. And I just said, if I save every single penny, every single month that we haven't spent, it's not like we limited ourselves, but I basically just essentially tricked myself into saving just that much more money every year. And I'd be lying if I could go and point to a number, but I'd challenge anybody to, as they're looking through their checkbook every single month, do you have $152.17 left over? Transfer all of it, to a savings account, brokerage account, get it invested. And I think you'll notice as the years go by, you'll start asking yourself, well, if I don't buy this thing this month, that means that's how much money I can save extra, right?
Well, and depending on how tight your budget is, I know personally, we are in a society where a lot of us like to reward ourselves. So we did such a good job this month, or we did all of this other, whatever. So I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to buy those boots. I'm going to, get the, premium YouTube channel. I don't know. But you spend money unnecessarily. And I think anyone who is a saver can attest to, or anyone who becomes a saver can attest to, it becomes just as addictive as spending once you get on that train and get that train going.
I can attest to that. And honestly, as you get closer to a realistic look at retirement, you start realizing when you're saving, you're not really, at some point it changes from I'm saving money to I'm spending money on my retirement, which is like something that you really, really want, right? I think most people want to have a great retirement. And once it is ballpark, close enough to actually start to taste and smell, that's kind of, at least that's how my mindset changed. So it's like, I don't consider it like I'm, punishing myself or living, too far below my means, if you will.
Well, I got to brag a little bit here about Steve in that he's managed our money since day one. Basically, once we got married and we decided to go to a one-pot family, meaning all of our money goes into one account together. We basically split everything down the middle, and he has managed all of our money and all of our investments and all of the savings and things like that. I can tell you, this is a little humble brag. He I've never felt like we've ever been denied any vacation or any stuff or anything. No. It's not, there's no punishment in terms of, especially when you can look at the end. One of the things we're going to talk about later that I'm going to briefly mention is that we have a meeting every month.
Yeah, retirement meeting. We started that just before COVID started.
Yep.
In fact, I looked that up the other day. The first retirement meeting we had was December of 2019. So just before we found out about COVID.
And we sit down and Steve just shows me all the stuff he's been working on all month, what we did last month and what this month looks like.
Yeah, I'll definitely have we'll probably have a full episode on the retirement meeting that we do. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. So,
yep. All right. Speaking of doing some work, the work that a lot of people do not do when they go into retirement is the work of time management, time planning. And I found 3 don'ts that have come up in my research for this particular topic. And because I'm a teacher, I actually have some experience in all 3 of these, because in the summertime, I'm off. I'm off for 2 months in the summer, and I've never really had to work in the summertime or didn't work in the summertime. Early days, I had a young child, and then later on, I just didn't work because I didn't want to and I didn't have to, and I was lucky that way. But there are 3 places that I discovered if I didn't sort of stay on top of things, I could kind of reap some negative effects from that. And I'm going to talk about that. So there's 3 things that you should not do when you are planning your retirement in terms of time management. Number 1 is don't lack a plan for your time. You should have a plan for your time. I'm going to talk about that in detail. Don't fail to communicate with your spouse or partner. If you are sharing a home with someone, the 2 people or 3 or however many people you're dealing with, there's multiple, generation families living together now, but right now we have 2 in our household. Make sure that you each understand what that daily plan is going to look like, because if you don't, it can cause problems. I know. So Steve works from home a fair amount of time. And so he's home in the summertime with me, but he's working. And so we've had a couple of like little glitches here and there because he's got stuff going on and I'm kind of used to doing my own thing in the summer. And so we've had to kind of manage how we're going to do that. And so we kind of start in the morning with not even a meeting, but you could call it a meeting where it's like, what do you have going on for the day? When are your meetings? And it could be something stupid like I'm going to vacuum. But if he's in a meeting, it can't be during the meeting that I'm vacuuming in his office. So, just stuff like that. So you got to communicate. You got to make sure that each person understands where their time is. And I think this is going to be very important going forward when neither partner is working. And those days are, potentially open fields, especially if you have 2 different people who manage their time differently. Steve is very task oriented. He is someone who is not going to lay on the couch and read a book for hours like I can do easily. And so, what's going to happen in that scenario where he's thinking, oh, we're going to do these projects together. And I'm like, dude, I got 3 hours on a book going. That's my schedule today or whatever. And then there's the 3rd thing. Don't assume work friendships will continue. And I am someone who has had 12 different schools that I've worked in, 12 different schools and programs in 28 years in education. And so I have met lots of people and I have made friendships with lots of people, really good, deep friendships. And a lot of those have sadly gone away because we moved to different buildings. We don't see each other. And there's a lot of regret just in my current working situation. There's people that I almost mourn because they're gone because I haven't maintained those relationships. And so I want to talk about that a little bit briefly. Okay. Anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, I just agree that in general, like the time management on a daily basis, right? So on any given weekend, I get up earlier than you generally. And one of the things I do is I do all the financial stuff on Saturday and Sunday mornings. That's like my time to do that. Can't do it really during the week, so I do it then. If I have 7 days off a week, I'm going to do that maybe 1 day a week. And I can very much see myself, if I don't have a plan for my day and you're still in bed and I want to go do something, that's going to annoy the heck out of me. Yes. Like, hey, let's get up and let's go do something. Right.
Yes.
So I think that, as awkward as it might sound, actually putting things on a calendar, figuring out how we're going to, manage different hobbies, going to see different friends and doing things will actually be beneficial in the long run on a day-to-day basis.
On our marriages. Yeah. He is, when Steve's ready to go, he's ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
He's ready to go now.
Let's go do it.
We actually had a little thing this morning because he got up, and I mean, I was 15 minutes behind him. I mean, it wasn't like we had this huge gap in time.
That is
but
true.
I am a very slow eater, especially on a weekend morning. I make a big breakfast, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to eat as slowly as my food is ice cold by the time that meal's done. And I am drinking my coffee and I'm reading my book and I'm having a great time. And once he hits the end point of whatever he had assigned himself for the morning, he wants to do stuff. And so this morning he worked out and he got in the shower, and then I went downstairs to work out, but then he was ready to go and I was still on the treadmill. And so he just went and did his own thing. But there was some annoyance. I mean, we were both a little annoyed with one another because there was no communication there. And so we had some stuff that we wanted to do, go to the grocery, drop some stuff off at the mailbox, that kind of stuff. I mean, nothing huge, but this is something that we're going to need to address going forward. It's a thing. And I think it's an important thing because how many of you have been around your parents and you've seen, especially after they've retired? I know Steve's parents were this way. And Steve's mom, when Steve's dad retired, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she was very similar to Steve. She was very task-oriented, and she had a schedule that she kept daily. And I mean, on that schedule was like crossword puzzles. And when Steve's dad retired, he had things he wanted to do, and so he would interrupt her day. And there were a lot of eye rolls. Lots of eye rolls. I don't want to be that way. I want our retirement relationship to be the best of our relationship. I want it to be great and loving and fantastic. And that's a huge goal for me.
Well, yeah. And I think if we plan that, it doesn't have to be every single day. Like it's like we're in the military or something like that. But I think there's some value in looking at the calendar and planning out a week, for example. Just look, what are we doing? What's up for this week? What are the different things that are going on? How do we fit those in? Play some Tetris and fit things in so that, we're taking care of each other.
So this is a nice segue back to point one. Don't lack a plan for your time. This is, that's what retirement is, right? You're creating a significant gap in your schedule. But you need purpose. The research is out there. It's all over the place. If you plan to retire and just do nothing and relax and those are your primary goals, you're not going to live as long. I mean, it's on there. You're going to waste away. Your brain isn't going to work as well. There's a lot of there's data. Okay, and I'm going to give you some sources for that a little bit later. So what do? You say, okay, are there hobbies or is there volunteering that you're interested in? Do you want to start something new? So because we're starting this podcast, I've actually been thinking about all of this a lot. And one of the things I'm particularly concerned about is brain health. We've watched loved ones in the last several years suffer through dementia and Alzheimer's. And I know that you can't prevent all of that, but there are things you can do to maybe slow some things down and prevent some of those, just the elderly dementia, just the lack of focus. And so what are you going to do? So I just started playing piano. And when I say playing piano, I mean, I'm playing, like not playing, but I'm practicing.
Beginner.
Because Steve plays an instrument. He plays guitar, and I've envied him for 30 plus years. And I know I'm not going to get to his level, but I think it would be really valuable. And I thought that. And so it's kind of like learning a language. It's great for your brain because your brain has to like learn something very new. It's like learning a brand new language, and it's a language that doesn't contain words. So I've been kind of noodling around with it 20, 30 minutes a day for about a week. And I am so excited about it because I like it. I don't think I really expected myself to like it. I'm not somebody who embraces new knowledge, unfortunately. Like I like little bits and pieces of data, but something like this that requires a lot of time and takes me away from my reading generally is not my favorite thing to do. Quite frankly, I'm loving it. So I'm really excited about that. We've got an in-home gym. And one of my plans when I retire is to start doing some of my exercising outside of my house, going to classes, maybe getting in. I'm not a yoga person, but yoga is very good for the aging body. So I think I'm going to go somewhere and do maybe once or twice a week yoga sessions.
Well, it depends where we retire too. If we stay here, we've got a fantastic gym. So from a space perspective, we don't need to really go anywhere, but depending on what it is you're trying to do, if you're looking for instruction, et cetera, yeah, of course.
Interaction, meeting new people, that kind of thing.
People, I don't know. You haven't sold me on that one yet.
What's your day going to look like? Something that Steve and I have talked about. We have been for the last 13, 14 years. We lived in Illinois, and I had an hour and a half basically commute to work every day. So this has been several years ago, but we got up at 4 every morning, and we still get up at 4 every morning because we've learned that if we want to work out, morning is the best time for us, because in the evenings we find excuses to not do that. So we get up at 4, and I'm assuming when we retire, that's not going to be a thing. But we also both really love the mornings. So that's something, we've got to kind of balance. So what's the night going to look like? What's the morning going to look like? And this sounds really like shallow, but it's not. It is, I want to be a night owl. I want to stay up till 1 a.m. every night. And he's like, no, we're not going to go that far. That's stuff that has to be discussed. It has to be managed. And I want to talk about that more later. So we've talked about the communicating with your spouse or partner, and I'm going to I've got this in an order. And of course, this is our first episode, so I'm a little bouncing around because that's kind of what I do. But
I hadn't noticed.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of how I go. It's kind of what I do. So going back to the friendships, I found a couple of studies from the National Institute of Health that talks about social interaction, how important it is. I could easily, in retirement, personally, one of the things I learned in COVID is I can stay in my house like a champion. I loved being in our house. We spent a full year basically sheltered in place. I mean, we would get out and go for walks on occasion and do some things, but in general, we were home for 12 months, and it did not bother me at all. But when we got out of it, we moved back to Fort Wayne, and I moved from a smaller school to a much larger school. And I learned that I have social anxiety, and it came about because of that. I went into this huge high school to teach, a high school that I'd taught in before, and it was overwhelming. So being at home, as much as I enjoyed it personally, wasn't good for me. And I know that now, and I'm glad I have that knowledge, and I'm glad that I have to start learning to say yes to social interaction and not try to avoid it because I really love my couch. That's not healthy for me. So that's something I want to focus on too going forward, is just the how do you build cognition? How do you build mental health going into retirement? Because I think a lot of us have this idea that when you're going into retirement, you figured all that out, and that's inaccurate.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Okay.
Is that it? We're done?
I think we're done.
You're finished? Okay, perfect.
I think these are all things I want to talk about a lot more
Perfect.
later. Maybe kind of spread out.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope you join us next time on the Retirement Outsiders.